Dr. Bladen is a leadership development consultant, executive coach, and president of Leadership Variations. She has driven award-winning leadership development programs at Fortune 500 firms and recognizable HROD professional services consultancies with measurable results in record time. Amy is an ICF ACC and board certified coach and brings to her practice a focus on leadership executive coaching with specialties in strategic planning, career acceleration, women's leadership, and focused behavioral competency development. Amy, it is so good to have you here with us today. Thank you very much for agreeing to answer some questions about executive coaching and your background and expertise.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to ask you these questions. So let's just jump right into the interview. How long have you been in the executive coaching space now?
So a little over maybe 20 years or so. Began more with related to 360 readouts and short-term laser coaching, and then progressed over time more to the full-blown coaching and the various lengths and associated with leadership development programs.
How have you seen coaching evolve since you started? Since you've been around for a few decades now, I'm sure you've seen some changes.
Yeah, actually quite a bit. I think the biggest change that I've seen is that there were a lot fewer professionals in the space. And I think there was mostly psychologists when I first started. So trained psychologists, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just what I noticed. Mm-hmm. Today, there is a lot more opportunities available for different varieties of types of professions and people who want to do it. Many more certification programs available, which is good and bad, because there are good and bad programs out there, as we know. Mm-hmm. And because it's a lot more of a known field. Companies know about coaching, companies use it internally, and there's becoming a lot more standards. So there are differences between coaching and counseling. Coaching is pretty much known as something for healthy people. It's not confused with, dysfunctional or mentally the EAP world in companies, which I think was confusing early on when you saw a coach in a company. Is that confused with somebody who's going to an EAP? And another big difference is when you were getting a coach early on, it was, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm on my last leg. I'm getting kicked out of the company. Which is interesting because it was always an investment. And I think the intent has always been to invest. But I think it's more recent that people realize it's actually an honor to be chosen for the investment of coaching. Mm-hmm. And people much more understand that. So I think that's a big thing. I think there's many more standards. I think it's not completely nuanced, but you have these bodies of coaching, like the ICF, like BCC. I think it's still not clarified. I think we still need a lot more clarification and what is good, because I certainly don't think we're there yet, but at least it's out there. I think it's still hard for clients to judge what is good just because someone says they're a coach. Somebody can just hang out their shingle and say, I'm a coach. And what does that mean? There's so many different types of, what does it mean if I'm a life coach, if I'm an executive coach? We try to explain it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if clients have any real understanding of it from their perspective.
It's really interesting you bring that up, because while the acceptance of coaching continues to increase, there are still a lot of people out there who aren't exactly clear about what coaching is and how it differs from other types of modalities like mentoring, training, consulting. Right. Just recently, I had a meeting with some executives in a fairly large company who were confused in that way. So I think you're dead on that there's still a lot of opportunity for people to understand what coaching is and how it's distinguished from other forms of leadership development.
Right. And I think that's partly our job as coaches, But I also think there's an opportunity for HR generalists in organizations to partner better with us in the industry. And for us, once we explain to them and partner with them, for them to help their companies understand what does that mean. And you don't hire a life coach to come in and work as an executive coach, and you don't hire a counselor to come in and do executive coaching.
Now, I know you're considered to be an expert on the use of assessments with individual and team development. How did you become so interested in the use of assessments?
Well, I don't know if I would consider myself an expert. I'm certainly extremely passionate about it. And who would consider me an expert? I'm saying that in air quotes. I'm an industrial and organizational psychologist by trade. So I have the good old PhD, which basically just means I went to school for 100,000 years. And what I didn't know when I entered was at least a third, if not half, of the degree is actually in psychometrics and everything to do with surveys, research, all of this. So what we're calling assessments was part of my curriculum. And by the time I was out, it was 7 years to get the degree after college. And like I said, half of it was the psychometrics involving an understanding of personality testing, 360s, serious statistics, and then a doctoral internship that involved going into and using this practice with a large organization. So I would say, how did I become so interested? Well, I was unknowing, that was part of the degree that I took. So, and I loved it. I really loved it. And I loved the idea that you are practicing the love of leading people and the people side of business, but you're adding a element of the rigor and the science to what you're doing as I hate the word soft skills. And this really sort of balances the science with the practice of what you're doing to measure people. So how did the answer is it was a defined part of my curriculum.
Right. Okay. Now I understand the background and how it all started. What role do you think assessments play in individual coaching engagements?
My bias, I don't believe that they're separate. I believe that individual coaching, it begins with an assessment of sorts. Mm-hmm. So the individual, you build the self-awareness with the person, and that can set the stage for what your coaching engagement is going to focus most. You can focus on anything. And whether it's executive coaching or even onboarding or anything, this is going to help us put a real, I don't want to use the word scientific here, but a finer nuance on, there's hundreds of things we can focus on. Where are we really going to nuance in? If these are the 15 things, we're going to look at science, from a numbers perspective. Here's the real areas of strength. Here's the real areas of development that we can focus on. Now, within this section, where should we focus? And you co-create with your client the area that you're going to focus on, but the assessment really gives you a more narrow focus. So that's that self-awareness piece to start the engagement. Does that answer your question?
Right. It's a way of increasing their awareness of
and narrowing the engagement focus.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Okay. How about in team coaching development engagements?
Yeah. It's the same. It's very much the same. With the team assessment, I use a particular I use a particular one that I love, because in the team assessment, you can get results as a team, but you know how the expression, the sum is greater than the individual parts. Well, you can get team results, but not know what is creating that team result if you're using a particular type of assessment. I'm sure there's more than just the one I use, but you can look at the different components that make up how the team is running and assess those components with the team. And again, setting up the engagements over time, you can say, hey, there's 8 different components that make up how the team is working together and building a high performance team, but we're not going to focus on all 8. We're going to focus on these 2 over the next 6 months. And this is going to be, we're going to have exercises specifically geared towards these parts. So again, it's focusing your engagement. It's bringing you get the self-awareness of all of the parts, but let's really focus in on, is it the mission? Is it the norms? Is it the how we are communicating together? And then you can really see what's contributing to those results.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
It does. Absolutely. They play a valuable role in individual and team coaching engagements.
For me.
Right, for you. And I know that you have worked with many teams and individuals, so you have a lot of experience there that's behind that answer. Now, speaking to your experience, Amy, I train coaches, as you know, with the Center for Executive Coaching, and I get this question all the time. And that is, there are so many assessments out there, and I feel like I would like to use some in my new coaching practice, but I don't know how to pick which assessments I might use from the many that are available. What do you say to that question?
The key for me is not the assessment itself. And I have a tool out there that I actually put together, which I'm happy to share with you. I think I might have shared it with you, but I always look at not what I'm assessment agnostic. Anything any of my clients want to use, even if it's the worst assessment. Now, let me put a caveat. If it's about selection, succession, or promotion, it must be a scientifically reliable and valid test measure. But for the most part, it's less about the assessment and more about the person and the qualifications and how experienced the person is. So generally, the better trained and the better experienced the person is with the tool, the more useful they're going to be able to make the assessment with the client. So you can so I love what you said is, get practice up with something, pick 2 or 3 of them and move on with that. With the exception of what you're doing leadership development wise, we're talking about coaching. So probably we're not talking about succession. Challenge me if I'm wrong here.
Oh, it could be. I mean, there are certainly parts of executive coaching that include succession planning, but that's just one aspect of executive coaching, right?
So my answer then would be, what is our purpose? First and foremost, if it is succession, promotion, or selection, then the first thing you want to do is look at the psychometrics of the test and figure out, here's my block of tests that I know well that fit those parameters. Secondly, you want to look at your audience. How much can they take? And there are audience that can't sit through a 200 item exam. So you're looking at a wide variety of things. I don't just give the answer, hey, pick a few and do it. There's a lot of things I'm going to be looking at. So new coaches, I mean, you're getting an answer from somebody who studied assessments as part of a long curriculum. So I'm not so sure that my answer is appropriate for everyone. I would say, yes, you can have 2 or 3 of them. But in the end, if you want a really good assessment that's going to work for everything, I recommend that people partner with other people who are super qualified. In that space. I don't know if that's the answer you want, but I often partner with new coaches who say, listen, I want someone who's super qualified in this space. Will you be my partner? I have partners, new coaches who are partners with me that I just do their assessment. And over time, they get trained in a more in a middle of the road assessment along the way. I don't know if that's the answer that you wanted to hear, but I'm definitely biased in that direction. Get qualified along the way, and until you really feel like you're experienced, partner with an experienced assessment person.
Right. Well, I'm not looking for a particular type of answer, Amy. I wanted to talk with you because I know that you've used assessments extensively and have a knowledge about them that exceeds the average. Even if you don't want to be called an expert, many people think you are. So this idea of actually working with an expert facilitator who really knows the instrument and is very practiced with it, has done many debriefs with it, and is an understanding of which situations it might be applicable for. I think that makes a lot of sense, what you're saying, that newer coaches may actually consider an alternative to deciding which assessments I want to use in my practice to which expert do I want to work with to start to gain an understanding of how assessments blend into coaching and create that increased self-awareness, help to narrow the focus, et cetera, so that I'm something of an apprentice. And then at some point, I might decide that I would like to use assessments in my practice, and be the person who actually is issuing the assessments and the debriefs. Or I might just want to stay in the role of the coach and work with a facilitator who does the assessment portion of the engagement.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too directive in saying that. One of the things that I did put in my cheat sheet that I have out there is there's some things you want to think about. I say that in quotes. You don't want to pick an assessment that is so narrow that it only looks at the strengths and ignores the development areas. And I am going to get a lot of people who disagree. That's beyond the scope of this interview. I can certainly give you my reasoning for why.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to be inclusive of strengths and needs in your assessment. I always talk about, you want to be very careful if you use a limited assessment. If you want to use an emotional intelligence questionnaire or survey, which there are some marvelous ones, do you have a reason for choosing that one? Do you want to use a women's leadership assessment? That's fine. Do you have a reason? Not just because your coachee is a woman, but is there a reason that those competencies are the ones you're going to assess, as opposed to a more broad assessment of competencies? And these are the things that someone who's newer may not know. Someone says, oh, this is a great emotional intelligence instrument. Well, it might be, it probably is, but why are you selecting that over a more broad-based leadership instrument? How difficult is the instrument? Benchmarks, I'm just using, that is a fabulous instrument by the Center for Creative Leadership. Yes, but it is very difficult to interpret. They have another one called Skill Scope, which is a great instrument for mid-level leaders. You wouldn't use that for the senior most executives, but it's for 90%, it's great. A more junior person in coaching wouldn't know that. So at the very beginning, why not consult someone who knows a lot about assessments and say, if I'm going to learn something that's more general, is there consult on your reasoning for using and learning. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to pick this because it looks like a nice one, or I heard it's a great assessment. I don't know if that's I guess the assessment that you choose should be for the purpose that you're choosing it for.
Right. And be very aware of that as you're determining whether it's appropriate or not. Yeah. The cheat sheet that you're referring to, Amy, I have seen it. I'm sure that some coaches who watch this interview are going to say, well, I haven't seen it. I'd like to have it. So is that okay if people email me? I'd be able to share it with them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also have, there's a place where you can download it directly from, I have a website where you can download it from, but absolutely.
Terrific. Yeah. So I'll share the link with anyone so that
Please.
They can go to your website and download it. So
yeah.
That question is answered. Next question is, what's the difference between assessments and surveys, and should a coach use both in an engagement?
Thank you. That's a fabulous question. It's actually my favorite question. Personality assessments, or the assessments, I feel like the simple way to look at it is, how do I see myself when I answer and look inwards? How do I view myself? Whereas a 360 or a survey is, and how do others see me? That's outward looking in. So the answer to your question is, it is fabulous to ask them both, so that it's an outside in and an inside out picture of yourself. So a coach can basically say, well, this is how you show up to yourself, but this is how you show up to others. Are you aware that you might think that you are extremely extroverted and you speak with people openly and you communicate with impact, but when I look at this 360, that's not what's showing up with that. So what's happening? What's happening here? Let's try to figure out where's the difference coming from. And you can first, instead of just throwing the result at them and getting some resistance, you ask them, because ICF always tells us it's not about, you talking at them or advising. It's what do they think? Using these tools together is a wonderful way to say, so what do you think? What is this telling? What does this mean to you? And it's a wonderful way to get them to interpret this result. It's right there in black and white. You said this, they said this. What does that mean?
That affirms that I'm doing that right, Amy, because generally I do use an assessment and a survey, a 360, to get that outside in perspective. And I find that that's very helpful to have.
Well, you said it's right. I'm cringing. It's not a right or wrong. This is all my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I respect and appreciate your opinion. So whether I say right, let's just say it's a good way. It's a good way to get
it works.
More data, more insight that can be helpful to your client.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here a little bit, Amy, with this last question, because I know that people who are watching this are curious to know, what are some of your favorite assessments to use and why?
I do have favorites. Of course, if someone says you don't have any information and you have to give us choices, my go-to personality assessment is going to be the Hogan. It is a very detailed, very nuanced, highly valid assessment. Without knowledge of whether my audience can handle a 200 plus person assessment, I'm going to hope that will be okay. The reason I like the Hogan is there's 3 parts to it. I'm going to look at the bright side of my personality, how I show up on a regular day. There's the dark side of personality, which is under stress. How do I show up? And there's the inside of personality, which is what motivates me. So it's very thorough personality assessment, which gives a lot of information, especially for executives. It really shows what makes me tick, and how can we do development to put some things in place, mitigators to help me when I know this is the way I'm going to show up on stressful days. Well, what do I need to do to I'm not going to change my personality, but what do I need to do to be aware, maybe push pause? So that is one of my very favorite, and it's valid. And in the psychological community, and that's me, it's very, very highly respected. And with that, for the outside in approach, I will pair that with most likely the combination of an interview 360 or the Hogan has a beautiful 360, and I have used the Benchmarks 360 by CCL, which again is a very pretty, you need to be highly trained with that. They require a certification with that. So I might put that together with it, and together I get the outside in and the inside out.
And I think you have a favorite team assessment too.
Oh, for sure. That one, I'm not agnostic. I've used a lot of team assessments, and without a doubt, I use the Rocket Model philosophy, which is the team assessment survey put together by Curfy International. It's been around for 30 years. It is, what I love about this one is that with very little training, this one, I can help someone to become, so I can actually go in and work with someone, and it is designed as a turnkey approach. So I can come in and do an assessment and then certify people to do it. It is, the 8 elements of what makes up a team to get results. It is simple to use, 15 minutes to take. The results speak for themselves, and it has a guidebook with 40 exercises that are each associated with the parts of the model. Highly valid and reliable, accepted in the psychological and the plain practical communities. I cannot say enough positive things about it. It's my favorite by far.
You've intrigued me to want to learn more about it.
Well,
you.
I'm presenting on October 12th at Andrew's class on the team assessment survey. So come visit.
Yeah, I'll have to join along on that one. Well, one last question, if I may, Amy. There's a word that you brought up a couple of times, and I want to make sure that coaches understand what this word means. When you say valid, can you just give us a little more explanation on what that means?
Yeah, actually, there's two words that go together, so I'll just give you both if that's okay.
Sure.
Reliable means when you do it more than one time, will you get the same result over and over again? If you take the test more than one time, am I going to see the same answer? Okay, that's reliable. And valid means, does the test measure what it is supposed to measure? You might get the same result taking it over and over again, but it's not measuring the same. It can be reliable, but it's not measuring the right thing. So let's take the example of the team assessment. If my team in the beginning takes it over and over again, are the individual people going to answer the questions in the same way? Now, it's going to change over time because we hope the team result's going to get better. But it's going to be consistent. They're going to measure the same things over time. Valid means, is it really measuring the performance of teams? And that takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of psychometric testing. And there's things we do called factor analysis and other statistical stuff that we do to test and measure whether or not the test actually meets up with these standards. Does that make sense?
Yes. And thank you for not going too deep into the
No, I'll bore you to tears.
I think it's enough for coaches to understand valid and reliable as two key words in looking at instruments like this.
And it's in this cheat sheet also.
Yeah, when they're valid and reliable, then you can feel comfortable that this is a good assessment to use for the stated purpose, as you had said earlier.
One of the things to realize, if you're using the test as a discussion, it doesn't necessarily have to be valid and reliable. If you're going to use it to select people in an organization to get a promotion, you better have it valid and reliable, because you can be sued. These are the standards on which you can prove that you don't have discrimination, that you made a decision that is not that is legally required. That's where it really becomes important.
Right. Yeah, very good. Thank you for adding that extra information. Wow, this has been really helpful, Amy. I've been wanting to talk with you about assessments and the use of them and with individuals and teams for quite a while. And I know a lot of people are going to get some big questions answered by having watched this interview. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, I want to reiterate that I love this world. I was trained extensively, but it is the perspective of an industrial and organizational psychologist. There are other psychologists, coaches, and people who would rightfully come and say, well, I don't agree with that, because the answer is not 4 when it comes to some of this stuff. And I might disagree with them, but that's okay. This is JMO, just my opinion.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Amy. Look forward to sharing the link on your website with coaches who are interested in seeing that cheat sheet that you've put nice time and effort into.
Thank you.